Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from deep inside the heart of the future Liberty State. Brought to you once again by On Fire Ministries, in the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news, where it's not about right or left, it's about right and wrong. It's about our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ. About not ending in prayer, but moving to action. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Father, deliver us from the evil one.
Welcome to Patriot Radio.
This is Matt Shea, and today on Patriot Radio, how to dismantle the FBI, and Hezbollah and Israel announce a ceasefire. Or do they? At least according to breaking news, that might not be holding. We welcome our audience on Patriot TV. Thank you. For those of you that don't know, we are on Patriot TV, broadcasting 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Saturday and Sunday, so that you get to know before everybody else what's really going on and what the news is behind the news, and what you and your family can do about it. In fact, how you can prepare for the times ahead and the times that are already upon us. But no fear, we were made for this. And that brings us to how you can follow us. You can subscribe to us on Patriot TV. You can be there. You can also subscribe to us on Rumble. And you can follow us on Telegram for real-time intelligence analysis and breaking news, the best in the country, because it's aggregated from the best in the country. Also, I want to bring up our encouraging word today from the Word, and there's a very interesting passage in Psalm 66, verse 8. And it says, "Bless our God, you peoples." In other words, we are supposed to be blessing God with our actions, but it says peoples. In other words, we're also supposed to be blessing God with our nation by keeping our nation free and turn toward Him. It continues, "And sound His praise abroad, who keeps us in life and does not allow our feet to slip. For you have put us to the test, God. You have refined us as silver is refined." I want to talk about that because we have a lot of people that are going through a testing right now, a lot of leaders going through testing across the country. And it seems like it's unnecessary, but part of walking through the fire, walking through the trial, is there is a special anointing that comes from that and a special authority that comes from that no one else has. You know, it's very hard for a combat veteran to talk with somebody that has not been in combat because there's a special authority and there's a special anointing that has come from walking through that trial. So if you've gone through a trial, think about it in those terms. If you're going through a trial right now, think about it in those terms, that it's only by walking through that fire that you actually can get that anointing and get that authority, and that God is taking us through these things during this time for the next season. And that the refining process means there is a heating up, and gold in particular, when you refine it, the impurities rise to the top. The refiner will scrape off the dross, is what it's called, the impurities off the top. And the refiner knows it's finished when he can see his face, his reflection in the gold. In other words, God will see His reflection in you. So don't shy away from the trials. Embrace them, because through those trials, other people and other nations not only are set free, but bless God. And that brings us now to your daily intelligence briefing, and coming to us from the China front. Sweden has requested that the Chinese vessel Yipeng 3 is taken into Swedish waters. Danish Navy vessels currently hold the Chinese vessel off the Danish coast. It's suspected of destroying 2 undersea telecom cables linking Finland, Germany, and Sweden, Lithuania. This is a point of escalation because sabotage like that is an act of war. And it's interesting how this is being played right now, and also that some of the rhetoric that is coming out of NATO is, well, it seeming like it's going toward World War III soon. Not that any of us advocate that. These are indicators, though. Also, the European Union is proposing sanctions on Chinese firms aiding the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But really, some of this is being talked about because of this incident in the Baltic Sea. Even though it's not said there, the news behind the news here is that these European countries are realizing now that China is not a friend. The problem they have is it's a major trading partner. And how to decouple. The European Union has proposed for the first time to target Chinese companies and individuals with visa bans and asset freezes over their dealings with Russian firms linked to Moscow's war effort in Ukraine. Again, these sanction packages recently put forward by Brussels aim to target 6 Chinese companies and 1 Chinese citizen, but expect this to grow here in the near term. U.S. Navy patrol aircraft flies through sensitive Taiwan Strait. Now, there's been a lot of freedom of navigation operations through the Taiwan Strait, but now there's very clearly the U.S. Navy's 7th Fleet said the P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft has flown through the strait, and it was acting in accordance with international law, but very, very clearly the United States is still staking claim to that area. And being honest about it, they're doing this prior to the inauguration to keep China at bay and keep China from doing something prior to January 20th. Taiwan must hold out 1 month if China invades, according to a U.S. war game. Taiwan would have to fight off a Chinese blockade and invasion for around a month before the United States could successfully airlift or sealift forces or munitions to support it, according to war games organized by the U.S. Congressional Committee Wednesday. Also not mentioned in this article, 2 island chains, one on the southern part of Japan, one on the northern part of the Philippines, they're being fortified right now. And it is conventional wisdom that China would have to take those 2 islands in those 2 island chains in order to support an invasion of Taiwan. And the United States, Japan, and the Philippines are increasingly fortifying those islands. So again, clearly, peace through strength in the South Pacific. But I find it interesting it's all happening right now. There must be some indication that China may try to pull something again before January 20th. Also, Reuters is reporting that satellite imagery from North Korea has shown an ongoing large-scale expansion project at the missile plant located in the Ryongsong machine complex near the city of Hamhung. Now, all that to say that the bottom line is this manufactures short-range ballistic missiles, which North Korea has provided hundreds of to Russia for their war in Ukraine. So it looks like they're ramping up production. South Korea very likely is about to respond by helping Ukraine. At least those talks are ongoing. And that brings us to the Middle East front. Joint statement on Lebanon ceasefire from the U.S. and French presidents. Also, Hezbollah and Israel have agreed to a ceasefire. But it's fascinating because right on the heels of that, Netanyahu said this: if Hezbollah violates the agreement, we will attack. If it arms itself, we will attack. If Hezbollah launches, we will attack. Then he says that, quote, I'll do whatever it takes to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. And on the heels of that, Hezbollah launched drones at sensitive military targets in Tel Aviv. And of course, the Israelis are pounding Beirut, Lebanon, as we speak. It'll be interesting to see if that ceasefire actually holds. Also, pictures out today, Israeli soldiers crossing the Litani River in Lebanon. And if you don't understand the geography there, everything south of the Litani River is what the Israelis want cleared out of Hezbollah in accordance to a prior agreement, almost 2 decades ago. Yesterday, a powerful Israeli strike in Beirut, actually it was on Saturday, targeted and eliminated Ahmad Salman, also known as Abu Hassan Faras, a high-ranking Hezbollah commander. So you can see Israel is right before the ceasefire, apparently taking out all of the last possible targets that it can. However, Hezbollah may in fact try to violate that ceasefire because they have taken so many hits. That brings us now to a very interesting kind of European front and Middle East front. German prosecutors reveal that Hamas has weapons stockpiles in the EU. So Hamas stockpiles in the EU that are kept ready for the moment an order is issued to attack synagogues and other Jewish targets in Europe. One of the sleeper cells has been particularly active in Denmark, just as we talked about on Patriot Radio 3 months ago. These cells appear not only to have stockpiles, but be activated here in the very near future. The fact they know about them, though, why aren't they doing something about it? That brings us now to the Russia front. The ruble is imploding. The ruble has lost 6% of its value in the past 5 business days and 20% of its value this year. Inflation is devouring the Russian economy. Also, oil prices, if they drop to $50 per barrel, would force ruble devaluation even more. We're going to take a look at that, keep our eyes on it, because as the economy goes for a nation, so goes a war. So while people are talking about Russian advances in Ukraine, and that is happening, there are also some economic considerations as well, not only for Russia, but also for Ukraine, which means that in the near future, it is likely there will be some kind of ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. I'm not going to call it a truce, and I'm not going to call it permanent. But there very likely will be some kind of ceasefire, and it's my understanding that President Trump is already working on that from Mar-a-Lago. A development regarding NATO, President of Cyprus, Nikos, that guy, presented a plan, for his country to join NATO during a meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden on 30th October, new reports show. The plan was eagerly accepted by Washington. So, if you don't understand the issue with Cyprus, there is an area of Cyprus claimed by Turkey. And so if Cyprus proper becomes part of NATO, does that put 2 NATO allies in conflict? Also, a senior British official confirms to Fox that the UK has deployed about 60 personnel to help protect U.S. military bases and determine who is behind the recent drone swarms testing U.S. military base security in recent days, not only in England. This is also happening in Virginia and across the East Coast. The drones do not appear to be those of hobbyists, from a senior U.S. official. Russia's largest drone attack of the war. Russia launched its largest drone attack against Ukraine overnight, focusing heavily on electrical infrastructure. Ukraine's Air Force said that 188 drones were launched, with 76 being shot down. 96 were lost to radar before impacting. And we are now in the era of drone warfare 100%. Russia also announced sanctions against senior UK government ministers in another escalation, and it appears that Russia and its rhetoric is increasing. I'm going to get to that here in a second. But Bosnia sentenced 3 Swedish citizens to 10 years for the murder of a Swedish gang leader in Sarajevo, who shot 26 times at a cafe in the Bosnian capital. The reason I bring this up is this has been very quiet, but really the issue in Bosnia is gangsters versus gangsters right now. And Bosnia has become a transit point for Muslim terrorists. We're going to see Bosnia in the news more here in the next year and a half, 2 years, because when that transit point is for sale, just like is happening with cartels in Mexico, terrorists can infiltrate Europe. And now going back to those sleeper cells we were just talking about in Europe, they can also be stockpiled very well. It's going to be interesting to see if those sleeper cells are actually activated in the next 90 days. But it does appear in the next year that is going to happen. And this gets to the Russian rhetoric. Senior Russian security official Dmitry Medvedev said on Tuesday that if the West supplied nuclear weapons to Ukraine, then Moscow could consider such a transfer be tantamount to an attack on Russia, providing grounds for a nuclear response, Reuters reports. Now, Dmitry Medvedev was the former leader of Russia. Everybody kind of knows he was Putin's number two that he could trust just to be there, even though Putin was running the country. That said, he's also the mouthpiece that says the most edgy rhetoric internationally. He's the one that says the red lines. And so he is used to really put a far boundary on things. And so a lot of people don't take him seriously. However, I think in this case, we should be taking Russia far more seriously than in the past. And I'm going to tell you why, because there's an incident that happened decades ago that we're going to talk about with our guest today. And that incident really speaks to how close we came to nuclear war during the Cold War. Now, when we come back, the national front, and also some things that are happening regarding U.S. Air Force bases as we speak right now, live on air.
Hey folks, it's your buddy John Rich here and co-founder of Old Glory Bank. Let me ask you a question. Why would you trust your banking with people that hate you? Well, you shouldn't. We're building a freedom economy, and now we have a pro-America bank. It's called Old Glory Bank. Check it out at oldglorybank.com and open yourself an account today.
Old Glory Bank is a full-service, FDIC-insured online bank with business and consumer banking and customers in all 50 states. It takes just 8 minutes to open an account at oldglorybank.com.
The Donor Deck represents a groundbreaking independent crowdfunding initiative driven by patriots like you to bring back our esteemed President Donald J. Trump to office. With unwavering passion, we pledge all profits from the sale to MAGA Inc. and Fight Like a Flynn PAC. The exquisitely detailed challenge coin is a timeless collectible to be passed down to generations. It symbolizes your continuous dedication to assisting President Trump in his quest to rejuvenate America to its former greatness. Get your Donor Deck now. Go to the Patriot.tv store and click on Donor Deck. Enjoy the magnificent artwork and scripture on each playing card, knowing our appreciation for your continuous dedication to assisting President Trump in his quest to rejuvenate America to its former greatness. You'll get this keepsake collectible challenge coin acknowledging your support for Donald Trump's run back to the White House, and the Donor Deck of 52 exquisite playing cards, plus a beautiful display case to show your challenge coin. Go to the Patriot.tv store and get your Donor Deck now.
And this is breaking news. A wave of unidentified drones has been spotted circling 3 critical Air Force bases, U.S. Air Force bases in Britain, according to Sky News. So it's happening again. Be interesting to see if this mystery finally gets solved and if there is a nation state actually behind it. That brings us now to the national front. Robert Spencer has the article here, but an illegal alien Muslim terrorist targeted Jews and Christians in Chicago. You're not hearing that headline anywhere else, really. When Sidi Mohammed Abdahalihi, a Muslim illegal alien from Mauritania, opened fire on a Jewish man walking to a synagogue on the Sabbath, and then on Chicago police officers and paramedics, politicians, and the media were slow to admit that he was a terrorist. The latest evidence, though, shows that he was not only a terrorist, but he targeted Jews as well as Christians. Quote, officers conducted a search of his vehicle and recovered a cell phone, which revealed with more than 100 anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish images, videos, and screenshots, as well as Google searches for a Jewish community center, the International Fellowship of Christian and Jews, plus Midwest Guns, Chicago Gun Store, and shooting range located in Lyons. According to documents, he used Google Maps to view routes, at least on 2 synagogues, the Congregation Ezra's Israel and another. So we talked about this, how there were going to be attacks ramping up, specifically targeting property and leaders in the Christian and Jewish community here in the United States of America. People will try to call this a lone wolf, but the fact of the matter is, these are radicalized online, and they're not lone wolf attacks in this sense. There is jihad that's being spouted, that they just go do it anytime they want to. That's not really a lone wolf attack. That's just connected to an ideology. And that ideology is the ideology of jihad, the ideology and I would really call it a theopolitical construct of Islam. Because it's not really a religion, it's everything in a way of life. And they even admit that. So why are we treating it as something it's not? And also, why are they slow to call this a terrorist attack? Or when Antifa was throwing firebombs and stuff, why are they slow to call those terrorist attacks? It doesn't fit the narrative. And that's why a lot of people are going toward X, they're going toward other social media, going toward real news shows like Patriot Radio and Patriot TV, because they're sick and tired of being lied to, and for the soft peddling of the true enemies of this country, which are not white nationalists or Christian nationalists. The true enemies of this country are communists and jihadis and globalists. And if you don't understand that, you can actually read a memorandum that was written in 2017 by a strategic planner on the National Security Council by the name of Rich Higgins. He wrote that memorandum to President Donald Trump. I hope President Trump rereads that, because the same enemies are still threatening this country. Also, this is a great view of how to deal with the leftist, the Marxist, the legacy media. Conservative activist Scott Presler had a CNN reporter come up to him and ask him a question. And the question was obviously loaded. The question was, you always say peacefully when you're talking about going out and taking political action. Do you say that because you're wanting to prevent another January 6th event? His response was, no, actually, it's to prevent people like you from saying that I'm other than peaceful. And then he said that he tries to be cute and that he tries to just make things happen. This is paraphrase. And I'll read this quote. It's to avoid people like you guys, CNN, saying that I'm anything but peaceful. My motto is just to be super cute, have my data and facts, and to treat everyone with love and respect. As you can see, an army of people will follow. Great response. I love that. And a great response to any of the Marxist media that is out there. They don't have the moral authority to speak into our lives. CNN does not have the authority to speak into your life. They don't. But they act like they do. And they constantly moralize when these same people are going out drinking in the evening, getting drunk and philandering all over the place. When they're watching pornography, they go out and do this stuff, and they're trying to moralize you. Don't let them. But keep a smile on your face when you respond to them. Panic in Ottawa. Now, Donald Trump put out a clear, defined tariff policy regarding Mexico and regarding Canada. And within hours, Prime Minister Trudeau contacted Trump, and Mexican President Sheinbaum didn't contact Trump, but posted online. So I want to read these. Trump said that he would impose an additional 10% tariff on Chinese goods, and he would impose a 25% tariff on Mexican and Canadian goods as long as the countries continue to allow immigrants to flow across the U.S. border. Immediately, Trudeau called Trump, and they had a good talk. In other words, I'm sure they came to an understanding of the realities of the strength of the United States. Also, Mexican President Sheinbaum said that migrant caravans are no longer going to be arriving to the U.S.-Mexico border because they're being stopped. It's amazing how carrying a big stick and speaking softly can change foreign policy in an instant. So carry a big stick, but speak clearly and softly. And President Trump is doing that. We're already seeing the results. Pretty amazing. Also, from the Western Journal, former President Donald Trump announced that Vice President Kamala Harris in Arizona trounced Vice President Kamala Harris in Arizona by more than 187,000 votes, a margin 18 times bigger than 4 years ago. Trump's decisive victory, coupled with GOP registering more voters than Democrats, suggests Arizona is morphing into a red state that might no longer be a battleground. here's the problem. Why did Kari Lake lose then? You're telling me all of these people who saw Kari Lake with Donald Trump, voted for Donald Trump, hundreds of thousands, but didn't vote for Kari Lake? There is something fishy down there that needs to be investigated. It needs to be investigated soon, and I hope that the Trump administration and their lawyers look into this. Trump won by 5.5% in the end, making it the reddest of the 7 swing states, and you're telling me Kari Lake lost. There is no way that's possible, statistically. It just doesn't, that does not follow normal politics and normal trend lines, and it doesn't follow normal vote counts. It just doesn't make any sense. They need to investigate that and do it soon. Also from WorldNet Daily, think outside the box. Lawmaker floats idea of state seceding to resist President-elect Donald Trump. Democrats in New York apparently believe it would produce a better result. Well, to secede, better result in the Civil War, obviously, because that makes sense. No, it doesn't really. I find that interesting that they're talking about secession, and it was the left that was accusing us of wanting to secede when we promoted the Liberty State movement, when we said, no, actually, this is allowed in the Constitution. You can split a state, or you can, what I like to say, create a new state. You can't do that according to the Constitution by a simple majority vote of the state House and the state Senate and the federal House and the federal Senate. Very simple. Simple majority vote. It is the plan, the constitutional plan that would actually work to create a new state in Eastern Washington. Now, years ago, 1,000 people voted on a name, Liberty State. The fact of the matter is the process still remains the same. And there's other people that have floated other things out there. But the problem with that is when you redraw county boundaries, or you split a county, or you try to go through another way, like amending a state constitution, it takes a supermajority vote to do that. In this case, it's only a simple majority vote. I find it interesting, though, that the Democrats are ignoring the Constitution and want to secede from the Union, or at least are bringing it up as a talking point. Also from WorldNet Daily, we are not perfect. Walmart abandons, I'm going to say this again, Walmart abandons trans products for kids and its ludicrous woke policies. And they cover it by saying we're not perfect. The world's largest retailer is scaling back its diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, according to the Associated Press. Folks, I want to tell you why that happened. Because you stood up and spoke out. That's why. All across America, and money talks. Money talks. Lastly, a little bit of a funny piece from the Babylon Bee. The turkey. Now, if you don't know this, every year, a turkey is pardoned by the White House at Thanksgiving. But this year, the turkey was denied the presidential pardon after photos emerged of it attending January 6th. I love it. They put a MAGA hat on it, too. Oh, that's awesome. Praise the Lord. All right. And that is the briefing. Remember, the antidote to dependency and socialism is to be a God-fearing, self-reliant, freedom-loving American. Thank you to everybody that has been praying for us. And make sure, if you need prayer, we're all about that. If you have a prayer request, we have a team here at On Fire Ministries and here at Patriot Radio. Just take that QR code, click on the link, send us a prayer request, and our team would love to pray for you. Regardless of what you're going through, we're all in this together, but prayer does make a difference. But once we've prayed, we need to move to action. That brings us to our guest today, J. Michael Waller. He's a senior analyst for the Center for Security Policy and the author of Big Intel. But first, we need to go to a word from our sponsors.
Hey, Patriot TV fans, feel like there's nothing on the radio for like-minded, intelligent people like yourself? Well, great news. Now you can stream Patriot TV on TuneIn during your drive to or from work. Whether you're stuck in traffic or cruising down the highway, you can catch every conversation from your favorite show hosts right in your car. No more mindless jibber-jabber. Tune in 24/7 on the road, at the gym, or wherever you are. Download the free TuneIn app now on Apple, Android, or your computer and never miss a beat. Patriot TV, now on TuneIn.
Now we have it. Kingdom Crunch.
It's important to start breakfast off with a power-packed punch. You want a complete amino acid score, good protein. If you turn the label over and look at the back of the box, there is no added sugars in either one of these flavors, either peanut butter or acai bowl.
Peanut butter has 11 grams of high-quality protein. Acai bowl has 8. Peanut butter has 11 grams of carbohydrate, acai bowl 12, and both of them have good solid fat content at 6 grams. Very filling, very healthy.
You will be fueling yourself with high quality fuel, starting off the day right. You can even use Kingdom Crunch as a snack in the middle of the day if you just have a craving and you want to eat something that is good for you, it has a crunch, and doesn't have a lot of calories.
There you go. Diabetic friendly, keto friendly, paleo friendly, Kingdom Crunch, and
child friendly.
And we're back with our guest today, J. Michael Waller, senior analyst for the Center for Security Policy, also author of Big Intel. And I just been following your post recently, very thought-provoking. And I want to ask about Stanislav Petrov here in just a second. But first, dismantling the FBI. This is really on everybody's minds. The FBI has become really a political weapon now. But there are some functions that it should do. Counterintelligence is one of them, which really kind of hasn't been done, at least well or efficiently in recent years. So how do we address this issue with the FBI? And what does it look like maybe in the future? And is the Trump administration listening?
First, Matt, we're the only major democracy in the world that has a domestic intelligence service with police powers. That's the FBI. And it didn't always used to be this way. It was supposed to be a federal investigative agency and law enforcement agency, but it's part of the intelligence community now. So it's a spy agency as well. You can't have this, joining of spy work and then legal work based on rules of evidence because they're two entirely different things. So the FBI has to be split apart.
So there's basically 6 branches of the FBI. How does this look like to try to split it apart? And also, what are some of the constitutional considerations regarding how the FBI has been operating and probably should operate as in the future?
Sure. Well, the Constitution never envisioned having a national spy service controlled by the central government that was accountable to neither the president or the Congress, nor in many cases the courts. So this is arguably, the FBI has grown to become an extra constitutional agency of its own. And now you have proposals where the FBI should have veto power over who the president appoints and doesn't appoint in his own government. So you're great. What's happened is this agency that people thought was bad when J. Edgar Hoover ran it, the FBI is far more powerful and abusive than J. Edgar Hoover ever was.
So is the Trump administration listening to any of these suggestions that you're bringing up?
Well, they're listening, but of course they're still putting a team together, so we don't know how things are going to look. There are some people who think it's a very good idea to dismantle the FBI. I can't understand why people on the Trump team would think otherwise, because it's just a brand, it's just a bureau, it's a third or fourth level government agency. We have other agencies that are already duplicating the FBI's functions, but there is that. But there are other people on the Trump team who think, yeah, the FBI is obsolete, it's discredited, it's politicized, it's weaponized. We need to save the key functions of it, but the FBI itself has to go.
So counterintelligence, we've talked about it here on the show before. Counterintelligence just needs to be rebuilt from the ground up inside the United States. I mean, it's just broken right now. Should the FBI be a part of that? Should there be a new agency that just has that specific function? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the FBI should not have that function at all. Counterintelligence meaning countering the activities of hostile foreign intelligence services against us. So that's counterespionage is fighting the spies part, but then there are covert operations that are a different part, and other things related to counterintelligence. FBI is really just a fly swatting operation. It'll find things. Sometimes it's done a really good job, like with, say, finding Robert Hansen, which it failed to detect in its own ranks, but when it finally figured out, hey, there are some things that are happening that are wrong, we think we've been penetrated inside, and the FBI actually paid a Russian official $7 million for the file, which turned out to be the Robert Hansen file. So it has done important work in the past. Maybe it still is doing it now, but by and large, you find that the counterintelligence part of the FBI is really politically corrupted. This is the part that surfaced the fake Russian collusion narrative on Trump. This is the part that Peter Strzok ran when he was in the Bureau. He came up through that whole thing. So when you have FBI counterintelligence viewing half the country as hostile foreign agents and supporters of Putin, you know something's really wrong and it can't be fixed.
So what should the FBI be doing then moving into future? I mean, we have infiltration by the Chinese, by the Iranians, by the Cubans, by the Russians. Special section of the Muslim Brotherhood has been here for years and years and years. What should they be focusing on? And are local law enforcement or state law enforcement agencies really equipped to handle some of that when it crosses state lines?
Well, our state and local law enforcement are not equipped to handle it to be performing a counterintelligence function because that's not a law enforcement function. That's a job for the federal government to be doing. The thing is, the state and local, not just the authorities, but the people themselves are the eyes and ears to find these individuals, to detect them, to be aware of them, to have that sort of counterintelligence mentality. But when you take things to the FBI with a complaint, much of the time the FBI is either too overwhelmed or just too bureaucratic and slow to do much about it. For me, the FBI has run its course. It's really, it's just an image now. It's hiding behind secrecy. It shows its contempt for Congress. It shows that it lies to judges to get FISA warrants on people for political purposes. So here you have the FBI not accountable to Congress the way it must be, not accountable to the courts, lying to the courts, committing crimes, really, to get warrants. Right. So you have a law enforcement agency that's committing crimes for political purposes. Where'd that come from?
Right.
And then not even the president has real authority over the FBI, which is supposed to be an independent agency and tamper-proof politically. But we've seen how it's been quite politicized and weaponized. So you can't have this anymore. But we need a counterintelligence agency. We need a federal investigative agency for investigating certain crimes or interstate crimes or child trafficking cases or all these other roles. So we need these functions, but you already have the DEA doing counter-narcotics. Why do you need a counter-narcotics unit in the FBI? We already have other services doing fighting cybercrime. Why do we need the FBI to do it? We have other services fighting child trafficking. Why do we need the FBI to do it? And we have alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and explosives. Now, there's something else that needs to be dealt with, but
yes.
Certainly you don't need the FBI doing the same function. So move the FBI's explosives function over to ATF and explosives and then worry about dealing with ATF later. The key is to take those FBI functions and to parcel them out to other agencies. And then the criminal investigative part of the FBI, it's very vital. Hand it over to the U.S. Marshals. The Marshals are practically scandal-free. People still trust the U.S. Marshals. And the U.S. Marshals were founded by the Founding Fathers. So there's no doubt about their legitimacy in our government. And then you don't have an FBI anymore. You just have bureaucrats that can be, their positions are abolished so that now they're no longer part of the government workforce. And then you take those units that have been parceled out to other agencies, reorganize them, taking the best of the best people, deciding on the proper functions for them, and then splitting up these things. Because the whole idea of having things, protecting our constitutional republic is to make sure that no government agency can have centralized control. So when you have an FBI that's so centrally powerful, that's a danger to everybody.
It really is. And you bring up the U.S. Marshals, and I've thought that for a very long time because they are virtually scandal-free. But also, is there a place for domestic intelligence? I mean, this gets into the really controversial issue, gathering domestic intelligence on organizations who are already here and then maybe giving them to local law enforcement, local county prosecutors to prosecute, to arrest and prosecute. How does that work? Yeah.
Well, it's really hard because you have your law enforcement rules of evidence in the court where you can have absolute positive proof. But if you didn't acquire that evidence legally, it's not admissible in court. So if you're collecting intelligence, intelligence is not admissible in court if it's done through spying. It has to be done through warrants and through other authorities. So you can't have rules of intelligence on the one side, which are not admissible in court, and then rules of evidence, which are, and mix up the two in the same agency. Now, police don't have that problem or that really opportunity to get evidence that they need. So if you have a terrorist group or a foreign intelligence service running operations in your state or your city or county or whatever, you need help, but you're not equipped to deal with foreign intelligence services just as a city police chief or as a county sheriff. So you're going to need federal assistance in busting these cases. But the FBI, if you split off the counterintelligence function, take it other counterintelligence functions that are domestic and homeland security, combine them into a standalone counterintelligence service, the way that had been proposed under a magnificent counterintelligence leader named Michelle Van Cleve over 20 years ago. If you had something like that, that could work to penetrate the foreign spy services in their countries and disrupt them before they can mess with us, but also to provide that expertise to state and local authorities. So apart from just splitting up the FBI vertically along its functions, you need to split it up horizontally as well and turn a lot of those authorities back to the states.
Back to the states. And we'll get to that after the break, but I want to dive in here a little bit because there's confusion with a lot of people where you have a U.S. corporation or maybe a U.S. nonprofit, as was the case in the Holy Land Foundation trial, the largest successfully prosecuted terror financing trial in U.S. history. You have a corporation and you have U.S. citizens that are part of that corporation, but they're really acting at the behest of a foreign adversary. And people will say, well, you can't violate their rights because they're U.S. citizens, it's a U.S. corporation, but they're acting at the behest of a foreign adversary. How do we handle that without running afoul of the Constitution? That's a very tricky issue.
Well, you can handle it. It's just that right after 9/11, President George W. Bush had to deal with these guys, the Holy Land Foundation. It's a jihadist, money laundering operation, and it was funding and it was funding terrorists, but it was part of this larger subversive non-state movement called the Muslim Brotherhood. So you have three things here. You've got a subversive movement that seeks to overthrow our Constitution. Just any jihadist by default seeks to overthrow our Constitution and replace it with an Islamic state. You have a counterintelligence problem because this is a private entity, transnational entity, but it functions like an intelligence service. And then you have the counterterrorism problem. FBI hasn't been able to handle that. In fact, the FBI has brought on these Muslim Brotherhood people as consultants, paid consultants. And the current senior director for intelligence operations at the National Security Council in the White House himself is a Muslim Brotherhood supporter. So the FBI has completely fallen down on the job on this one.
So how would it look in a new system, in an ideal system in the future? How would it look to identify an organization like that and then disrupt it and dismantle that organization inside the United States of America? Because really that's what needs to happen if we really want to secure our country from these terrorist elements that have already infiltrated.
Right. First, you have to admit that it is a foreign terrorist organization. And this is where every president has failed to designate the Muslim Brotherhood as an international terrorist organization, even though a lot of Arab and Muslim countries have, like Egypt has, United Arab Emirates has, others have. So they recognize it as a terrorist group and a terrorist threat with its own intelligence service within it. So they're banned in those countries. We don't want to do it here because there's a big lobby for the Muslim Brotherhood. And it's not just Muslims who are lobbying for this. Most Muslims in America are afraid of the Muslim Brotherhood. But it's the only horizontally organized and vertically organized Muslim network with its own command and control in America. It's because Islam, it's not the same thing, but think of it like evangelical Christians versus, say, Catholics or Episcopalians. You've got the evangelicals, they don't have a vertical church networks and hierarchies like the Episcopal Church does or the Catholic Church does. So similar with Islam, you've got the Shiite, the Iranian type of Islam is vertically integrated with its own hierarchy, but the Sunni Muslims, of which the Muslim Brotherhood is part, are horizontally integrated. So you don't have that command and control, except when you're organized like the Muslim Brotherhood, which provides that globally.
Right. And
a lot of local authorities know this. They find these things out. They even tell the FBI, but they can't get the help they need from the FBI to do this. So they're going to need legal tools at the state level, where right now, and you see this in a lot of southern states, it's already happening. They're instituting their own counterterrorism laws because the federal authorities aren't enforcing federal counterterrorism laws. So the states are stepping up to the plate.
And when we come back from the break, Let's talk about that. What should the states be doing? And also, what about all these dozens of unindicted co-conspirators in the Holy Land Foundation trial that are still operating in the United States of America?
Attention patriotic businesses. Do you want to see your sales skyrocket by selling your products or services to like-minded patriots? Well, if you're an advertiser who embodies the timeless principles of freedom, liberty, and patriotism, look no further than Patriot TV. Our viewers are responsive, economically active patriots who are committed to supporting businesses like yours that align with their values. For more information on advertising on America's new network of proud American businesses, email us at advertise@patriot.tv.
I couldn't give anything a higher endorsement.
I would be remiss had I not include Cardio Miracle on my very short list of secrets.
It's the real deal. It's a real product. It's not another supplement.
I'm operating about 6 to 8 hours, and I've noticed that being on this Cardio Miracle has made a huge difference.
Since I started taking Cardio Miracle, about 8 months into it, the benefits have been fantastic.
You know, if I get hungry, then I just have a Cardio Miracle.
Not only is it safe, but it's necessary to take Cardio Miracle to stay well.
This let me sleep. It's filling up more energy, more get up and go, and it's all because of what this company does.
For me as a doctor, Cardio Miracle is a staple.
Cardio Miracle to me is hope in a glass.
To try Cardio Miracle for yourself and get a special fan discount, go to the host page right now and click the link for Cardio Miracle.
And we're back with J. Michael Waller, senior analyst for the Center for Security Policy, also the author of Big Intel. We were just talking about before the break about the Holy Land Foundation trial, dozens of unindicted co-conspirators. That list was upheld on appeal. Some of them are still operating here in the United States of America, and they have been for well over a decade. What should be happening in regards to that list? And is that something that states should take on? Should that be something that the federal government should take on? Because they've been really operating with impunity.
They have been operating with impunity, and this is something where the federal government really has the main role, because most of these individuals are foreigners, or they became naturalized American citizens under false pretenses, meaning the foreigners can simply be deported. The falsely naturalized American citizens can be stripped of their American citizenship if it can be proven in court that they lied, or they took other false oaths when they took their oath of American citizenship. And so it's not hard to get rid of these networks. And then some of them are still committing their terrorist crimes and their material support for terrorism activity. It's just that, where's the FBI been all this time? Who have they been hunting down for the past 4 years? It hasn't been these kinds of jihadis.
No, Christian nationalists apparently might be the bigger threat, according to this FBI. Yeah. So talking about, some of these networks inside the United States of America, you have local officials that know about the existence of these things. Here in Washington State, that's the case, but they don't do really anything about them. They say that's just too big. But county sheriffs and some of these prosecutors, at least in their own communities, if you had an unindicted co-conspirator in the largest terror financing trial ever successfully prosecuted in U.S. history, don't you have some kind of probable cause to at least begin an investigation?
Certainly, and sheriffs have a lot of power. In many parts of the country, sheriffs don't use the power that they have. There either hasn't been a tradition of it, or they're afraid, or there's this deference to state authorities, or even worse, deference to the FBI. You look at a lot of these FBI cases, they're not busted by the FBI. They're busted by the stateies or the sheriffs or the townies. They're not, the Bureau then comes in and then takes over and then claims credit for it and gets a bigger budget. And the guys who did the real work don't get the credit. And then they feel uncertain, and their peers and their colleagues don't know. But what we have is a network of great police at every single level and great sheriffs. But they've got to, many of them do communicate already, but there needs to be a means for them to communicate more and to share information more, and then to work with private groups, especially a lot of them in the Washington, D.C. area. There's our group, the Center for Security Policy. There's the Capital Research Center. There's Judicial Watch. There are a whole bunch of other ones that already have access to a lot of the data that these sheriffs and police forces need. It's just they don't know the existence of one another.
They don't, or they kind of think that the federal government maybe already have it in hand or something like that, but really that's just not the case. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the communist networks. You have the John Brown Gun Club, you've got Antifa, Socialist Rifle Association, Redneck Revolt, although that's kind of diminishing pretty significantly right now. And there is evidence of funding of some of these radical Marxist organizations by China directly here in the United States. And I think some people are a little bit reticent to go after Antifa because, we just kind of disagree on stuff. And yeah, they get a little bit out, a little crazy, but they're just young kids. It's not that big a deal. When actually these are part of larger networks. And how do we break through on that issue with some of the authorities that have kind of turned a blind eye to it?
First, they're breaking the law. Second, they're engaged in active, organized criminal conspiracies to break the law. They're plotting to destroy property. They're plotting to commit arson. They're plotting to commit robbery. Some of them are even plotting to commit murder. Remember all the cop killings? Those were planned activities in many cases. Yet somehow they're off the hook because they're kids? No. They're off the hook because the people in authority share their political views, or at least sympathize with them, or sympathize with the end goal. But these are active, organized criminal networks that have political agendas, or they're political networks that commit crimes as their way of doing business. Either way, there's no shortage of laws on the books at every level to bust these networks. The question is, who's going to bust them, and how are they going to bust them? And then what kind of political pressure is put on officials higher up the chain to make sure that these people, if they are arrested, they're going to get let go, or they're not going to get prosecuted.
Right. It's a matter of political will. Well, we have about 3 minutes left. I really appreciated your post regarding Stanislav Petrov. Nobody knows who this is, but I think it's important for people to understand how close the United States and the Soviet Union came to nuclear war. And it wasn't just this one time, several times during the Cold War. But this was just one incident of somebody who stood up for the right thing. So if you could describe to everybody listening and viewing who he is.
Yeah, the comment was really, we find unlikely heroes in the strangest places and people who didn't even intend to be there. And even though our governments are adversaries toward one another, or our ideological systems, we're all people in the end. And this Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov was a Soviet officer whose job was to watch the early warning systems to see if the United States had launched a nuclear attack on the Soviet Union. This was 1983, right after the Soviets shot down the Korean airliner with Congressman Larry McDonald on board and 268 other people. So the world was in a really tense situation, and the Soviet censors had detected what they thought was a launch. It was up to Lieutenant Colonel Petrov to instantaneously think, is this a real launch? In which case, I do the launch codes to launch nuclear weapons against the United States, or might it be a false reading in which I should, be cautious? And it was up to him and only him to grapple with his judgment and his conscience and everything else. And it was a pretty sure thing that it was a launch, but something in his head said, no, this is an accident. It turned out it was some sort of like solar reflection off the clouds that the Soviet early warning satellites picked up. And he did not turn those keys to punch the codes to launch those nuclear missiles at us. He was disciplined for this, but he saved the world.
Sometimes you got to pay a price for doing the right thing.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, well, he certainly did the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And J. Michael Waller, before you leave, I do want to give you the opportunity to talk about Big Intel. It is really shifting the narrative, but it's shifting the discussion in a real positive way here for this great republic.
Well, thank you. Big Intel is my new book. It came out earlier this year, and it's about how the CIA and the FBI went from Cold War heroes to deep state villains. So there it is. It's available. Best places on Amazon, but it's all about how critical theory, cultural Marxism, was developed as a Soviet intelligence operation to subvert the West, and how our FBI and our CIA absorbed that. They didn't fight against it. J. Edgar Hoover fought against it. But after that, in the 70s, 80s, and up to today, they started absorbing it. So today you have wokeism, which is the ideological operating system of the CIA and the FBI. So this book shows how it happened, names the names of who's responsible, explain precisely when it was carried out and by whom, and then ends with 2 chapters about what do we do about it? How do we fix it? President Trump could fix it.
He can, and I hope he listens. J. Michael Waller, thank you so much for joining me on Patriot Radio. Once again, it's always a pleasure. Love the conversation. Be blessed and keep up the fight.
Good to be with you, Pastor Matt.
Happy Thanksgiving. Stanislav Petrov, if you haven't seen that, check it out online. It's amazing. Big Intel, Center for Security Policy.org, but check out Big Intel for the practical ways to change the narrative and to change your community too. Because it's going to take all of us to do this, not just President Trump. It's going to take all of us. So what can you do today? Well, one of the things that you can do is educate your local law enforcement, especially your sheriff, your county prosecutor, on the Holy Land Foundation trial. That's what you can do. If you've never heard of the Holy Land Foundation trial, there's a huge list of unindicted co-conspirators in the back of that. Most people in law enforcement, great folks, well-trained, very well-meaning, well-intentioned, had no clue about the Holy Land Foundation trial, never even heard of it. So take a moment and just say, hey, have you heard of this? And help educate your local law enforcement and county prosecutor to be part of the solution to disrupt these networks inside the United States of America. Secondly, you can always go to KeyWiki with Trevor Loudon, and you can investigate some of these organizations that I talked about that are communist organizations, particularly on the coasts. The Socialist Rifle Association, the John Brown Gun Club, Antifa, Redneck Revolt, some of these other Marxist organizations are all on KeyWiki, and educate your local law enforcement about the fact that some of these Marxist organizations are funded or have received training from China and Chinese intelligence, and that at least it's worth an investigation, at least it's worth a look. The bottom line is Christian nationalists aren't the threat to this great country. It's communist jihadis and globalists. And as Rich Hagan put in that memo back in 2017, the only way that we're going to fight this is together, that we're going to have to stand up together, make it known, educate people. Don't presume people know. And support those who are taking action to restore the republic and to take care of the real threats to the United States of America, not these fake threats that have been ginned up by the left. With that, also send your local law enforcement an encouraging note. Quite often, they're attacked when they should be praised. This is Matt Shea. Thank you for joining me on Patriot Radio today. May God bless all of you. He is making this generation the greatest one. The awakening is here. Keep up the fight.